بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. على بركة الله نبدأ. Thank you everyone for coming today for this unique event for Al-Qura University Health Sciences. It's a unique event for a couple of reasons. The first one, it's actually the first medical event by Al-Qura University with all the medical colleges, medicine, dentistry, health sciences, nursing, pharmacy. It's the first national and international event by itself. Definitely this would never been happening without the amazing teamwork that the demonstrators, the faculty staff have contributed to the success of this event. The second reason that this event is really unique is because of the theme of the event. We started planning research at the Faculty of Dentistry, which is only 6 years old. We started that a year ago, and our plan started where everyone has reached. We started with technology transfer, innovation, commercialization of research in mind. We didn't want to do research just for the sake of research. We wanted to do that really to make a difference in patients' life, to make a difference in economy of our nation. So for this reason, we invited distinguished speakers from all over the world, from the United States, from the United Kingdom, who have contributed in this area of dental innovation and commercialization of research to share with us their expertise. And we have invited as well distinguished dentists, academic dentists from across the kingdom to facilitate the interaction between our universities and the rest of the universities, as well as the Ministry of Health and different health sectors. Without further ado, there will be more formal opening ceremony at 12:30 with a formal speech, invitation speech by our respected Dean, Dr. Mohammed Biari, who have contributed amazingly to this event. And before concluding, I would like to thank every single member in the organizing committees, all the staff, all the demonstrators for their hard work. I forgot to introduce my name. I'm Suhail Bajamal. I'm the Associate Dean for Postgraduate Studies and Research at the Faculty of Dentistry. So we'll start with our first session, which will be moderated and chaired by Prof. Abdulghani Mira. Prof. Abdulghani Ibrahim Mira is the Dean of Faculty of Dentistry at King Abdulaziz University. He's a professor of prosthodontics and aesthetic dentistry. He's a graduate of King Abdulaziz University. He completed his postgraduate degrees abroad. He had a Master of Science at Eastman College at London University and a PhD from Goldman College, Boston University. He has held many administrative positions and received many distinctive awards. I would invite Dr. Prof. Abdulghani Mira, please, to the podium. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizing committee of this forum for honoring me to chair this first scientific session today. And I would like to thank Dr. Mohammed Biari, the Dean and the Chairman of the organizing committee, and Dr. Suhail Bajamal for his introduction. Today, inshallah, we will have this full session that will be presented by three distinguished speakers. It will start from now and will end at 10:45 a.m. Each speaker will present his speech in about half an hour, and then we will have 15 minutes at the end of the session for discussion. Let me start with our first speaker, Dr. Sultan Al-Mubarak. Professor Sultan Al-Mubarak has widely published internationally as well as nationally, and he is a well-known member of the Netherlands-based Techno Policy Network. He is currently a consultant, a senior clinical scientist at the Research Center, and consultant periodontist at King Faisal Specialist Hospital and Research Center in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and also an adjunct professor at the School of Dentistry, State University of New York, Buffalo, in the USA. He's also a consultant at King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, CAST, and he was instrumental in establishment and development of the first Saudi National Biobusiness Incubator. He's also currently active as an executive consultant for Better Program for Technology Incubator, and also he has chaired and worked as an active member of Research and Ethics, Innovations and Incubations Committee. Today his presentation title is How to Enhance Your Creativity and Innovations. Please welcome Professor Sultan Al-Mubarak.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good morning, everybody, and I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to this important event. And though my background is in the dental field, but most of my work, especially within the last, I would say, 7 to 10 years, has been mixed between dental research as well as in the biotechnology, innovation, and creation issues. The title of my presentation today is How to Enhance Creativity and Innovation. So I'm going to talk in general about creativity and innovation. So when we are talking about creativity, what's creativity? Creativity is the ability to make or otherwise bring into existence something new. It could be a solution to a new problem. It could be a new method or device, or even it could be a new artistic, an objective or form. So mainly when we are talking about creativity and innovation, we should think outside the box, not within the box, because most of the traditional thinking, it's not creation or innovation. So it can be described as one's ability to come up with a clever, practical way of solving a problem or of doing something by thinking outside the box. Just to bring your idea to Steve Jobs, a few years ago, when he got the iPhone, the CEO of Microsoft, he mocked at him, saying that who's going to be crazy enough to buy this iPhone? And now we know that iPhone is one of the top 7 products all over the world. It's not because of anything except that he thought outside the box. So when we are talking about innovation, it's adding something new to an existing production process or a process, adding for an existing. When we're talking about adding or existing, this will lead to a successful implementation of new ideas. So when we generate an idea, we are talking about creation. When it gets developed and launched, it is innovation. There is different forms of innovation. Innovation can be in a process, like the ATM machine. Usually we used to go to the banks and take the money and do the money exchange. But now, going to the ATM machines, usually most of the work can be, or most of the money transaction can be done through that process. Innovation also in product or services, most of the electronic transactions now, we do it, or most of the transaction in banks, we do it electronically. And innovation in management of work organizations, just to give an example of health insurance. Now going to the hospital, to private hospitals, you don't have to pay if you are insured by the medical health insurance. So that electronic generation of health services, it's an innovation in the management and work organization, which improves also the health services. So is there a difference between creativity and innovation? Though there is a difference, but they are gonna, or they are working hand in hand together. So creativity is the capability or act of conceiving something original, while innovation is the implementation of something new. Innovation creates and adds value. So creative people, they're also very likely to be innovative. Innovation is the implementation of creative idea, and the action of solving problems or creating something in a way no one has thought of before. So when there is a new idea, or someone is thinking of an idea that can be implemented and think of it, this is what we call creation. And the skills of creativity is applied throughout the process of innovation. So creation, it doesn't stop at one point. Creation always go hand in hand with innovation. So when people come up with a new idea, this display of creativity, but there is no innovation until you take an action, until you do such a process. Therefore, when we are talking about the definition of innovation, it goes hand in hand, several processes. There's an unmet user need, and you need to solve an issue or a problem, and such solving of an issue needs creation or needs creativity. Such creativity, it won't happen without applying certain invention, either a know-how or a patent or both together, and combine it with a business model in order to create a business model for such successful creation and or innovation. Just to give an example, the insulin pump, if we're talking about it 50 years ago or 60 years ago, it was a very big tool held on the back of diabetic patient, and he used to, and it's weighed tens of kilograms, and it's very heavy. This is what we call creation. Though they did not stop at this point, an innovation happened afterwards. So the big pump, it went, and I'm now holding a very small pump, which is exactly the newer version of that insulin pump, and it has many innovative technology on it with lots of advantages for it. Same goes for computers, for PCs. 40 or 50 years ago, it was filling up a big room, and then the desktop came after. It went to a laptop, and afterwards, it's a handheld device. However, we have to know, creation, it's not spark. It's not a sudden spark. We have to be very patient. It is a slow hunch. So we don't have to rush in order to do creation. We have to be very patient. Therefore, good design, often it takes years, not quarters, to bring results. Sometimes a failed product sow the seeds for later successes. So when I used to rule the incubator, when an entrepreneur comes to me or a guy who's having an idea, when he tells me that he did not or he didn't fail in his past, this is not a good sign, by the way. Usually I tend to accept or to like people that they had previous failures, because people learn from their failures rather than having success, because you won't have better success without learning from your mistakes. Just to give an example, Thomas Edison, he made thousands of unsuccessful attempts before inventing the light bulb. Morita, the Sony's first product, which is one of the famous brands all over the world, the first product for him was not a TV or a phone. It was a rice cooker that didn't work well, and he sold less than 100 units from that product. So we have to not to be afraid of having a new idea or try new idea. We always believe that if we do new idea, that people are gonna knock our door. This is not the case. When you do new idea, it's gonna be rejected by people and also by businessmen. So you have to do lots of attempts in order to be accepted for such product. So most of the time, great ideas are rejected by public as well as businesses. Just to give an example of some of the failures, Kodak, when they invented the core technology for digital camera in the 70s, they did not pursue such opportunity. So what happened? Sony developed a different prototyping, and they were the leaders in digital photographies. Kodak were almost going to bankrupt. They sold some of their assets in order to avoid bankruptcies. And this is one of the good examples of such failure attempts as well as successful attempts for both companies. So you need to resist the temptation to look for immediate results. Deadlines also can focus creative teams, but should not be overused. Deadline is good, but when you're talking about creativity and innovation, do not overuse deadlines. Close communications with creative people or the staff can help also leaders to decide when and how to set a deadline that will help rather than hinder the creative process. So you have to believe in your capability, and the good thing that all of us has a creation. It's not a trait. It's not linked with intelligence. It's linked with enhancing such process within our mind. So it's not for certain people. It's anyone that can be creative and innovative. So when we are talking about creation, it's the ability to generate new ideas, sometimes by combining ideas, sometimes by changing such ideas, and sometimes by reapplying existing ideas in a different format. So you can also combine these ideas by combining older ideas into a different way, as I just mentioned earlier. Just to give an example, the printing started by the printing press by combining a movable types and the wine press for pressing the wines and for the movable types of doing the paper. Also, when we're talking about the largest car company, automobile company, Henry Ford, what he did is he combined the automobile and the assembly lines. And we know now that Toyota takes only 7 minutes to produce new cars. The average for producing new cars from zero till the end, it's only 7 minutes by combining the assembly line. Talking about also another part of, or another example of such creation and innovation, George Lucas, which is American film producers and entrepreneurs, that he did the Star Wars, which gave him lots of reward by combining some ideas, which is the low-budget science fiction films, as well as the mythology plot and the samurai films. So, always we need to follow a process to come up with good ideas. So, creativity requires more than the rapid generation of ideas. As I said earlier, we have to be very patient. Creative people works hard and or smart. Sometimes working hard is not the end. You have to work smart in order to solve an issue and continuously to improve ideas as well as solutions and making gradual alterations and refinement to their work. So, creation should focus on ideas that are novel as well as useful. We should find an idea that have impact on the world, and it should go a process of when we generate the idea, we should go and refine it, test it, modify it before it come up with a worth idea that can give or a business or successful business. So we need to give a new idea a chance, talking about time. Innovation and competitive advantage are not generation problems, but it's when we recognize the idea and try to solve it. So we have also to be ready to try something new. Anything new may be seen as a risk, and sometimes we have to swim against the wave, although sometimes it can be rejected by the public. So one of the best examples, when talking about Thomas Edison and the light bulb, he did not invent the light bulb. He refined it and made it commercially available. And he had one of the oldest lab, or if I may call it incubator, with his colleagues to build a large studio, working with other inventors, trading ideas and collaborating on projects, and created the world's first industrial research laboratory. So always it's easier to be creative when you are doing something that's fun to do. Usually when we see our kids playing and bringing some new, strange, crazy idea, we should deal with it in a positive way rather than a negative way. We should encourage them, although sometimes it might look odd, in order to encourage them to do something. And now most of the new companies, or most of the companies, they are trying to have new way of dealing with their employee. Just to give an example, Google are giving their people sometimes to sleep and nap within the work. Sometimes they are giving us also space to go and to do some activities, playing, and there is also tremendous activities towards doing some entertainments for the workers at workplace, as this shows a great improvement for the productivity for those employees. Sketching the idea, sometimes we have triangles, circles, and when we are combining it together, it comes into a running train. So when we are talking about these triangles and circles, when it gets together, when it fits together, it comes to a running and moving idea. So we should focus on some of the idea, though it's not, in the beginning, it may not be applicable to the audience. However, sometimes after you reconstruct it in a way or another, it might reflect to be a very positive advantage. Also, sometimes you have to think backward. When I'm staying home, sometimes I think of an end product. When we think of an end product, it might be a good start, creative idea to go ahead and start to establish how to finish that product, though it's strange or it's not applicable, but it's also very advantageous to go and think backward. If you think of the end product, then think how to make it or how to establish it. So it's always possible to start by visualizing the finished product, then work backwards, step by step. So, just to summarize on creativity and innovation, it's not vague, it's not mysterious or inaccessible. It's something built in all of us. And again, I'm saying it's something built in all of us. So some are better than others, but we can grow our creative genius by also combining our activity and working together. So the truth about creativity and innovation is that we all have the potential to create good ideas. To close up with my presentation, I'm just going to give you some advices and examples about some of the companies. Talking about Nokia and BlackBerry. Nokia, we know a few years ago, they were the leaders in doing the phones. And they were worth 125 billions, probably around 9 or 10 years ago. Now they are worth 7.2 billions. BlackBerry, they are offered 4 billions now, after it had been estimated at 83 billions only 6 years ago, or less than 6 years ago. And part of it is because of WhatsApp, and I'm going to tell you why. Because BlackBerry just invented or got the way how to send messages between their devices only. But WhatsApp made it easier by having or sending the messages from different machines. One of the very important topics is no enemies. We know the competition between Apple and Samsung. We know that there is several lawsuits has been filed from Apple to Samsung, and also from Samsung to Apple. And there is hundreds of billions have been awarded by the court from Samsung to Apple. Yet, the biggest customer for Apple is Samsung. And also, the biggest or one of the major clients for Samsung is Apple, because they are producing more than 25 or 250 million smart devices annually, and the cost of the processor is $20. Imagine when you multiply these numbers. So who's selling these processors as well as the screens? It's Samsung. It's not LG. And they are selling it to Apple. Success is not permanent. And just to give an example, the stock price for Apple's now, I think it's 500 range. It's not even 700. It's 500 something. And just to give an example, a couple of years ago, Apple price was in the stock was exactly like Google. Now Google is double. The share price is double Apple. Why? Because Google is inventing new ideas. Apple stopped almost at 2010. They are just now upgrading things, and they didn't invent some new idea. While Google, as we know, this year they are going to have the eyeglasses with the internet, or with the, that you can view the maps and lots of other features on it. Success is not immediate. We know about John Koeman and Brian Acton when they went to Facebook as an employee and they have been rejected, but now they sold their company for $19 billion US equivalent of cash, as well as share price, to Facebook, rather than to be an employee there. So when we are looking about the road to failure, when you fail, this is not the end of the road. You should change your direction. So do not stop at the failure end. Try to take another way. When you fail in something, this is an indication that you need to change your direction for a better way. Again, I just would like to thank you for having me here. I just would like to have a comment about my presentation here. I'm coming from the King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, located in Riyadh, and it's the Ministry of Science and Technology. We are doing lots of national missions. One of the major national mission is the National Science and Technology and Innovation Plan in different sectors, including medical and health sector. We are also communicating with the private sector for several activities in order to develop the national policy for science, scientific research. Governmental ministries are participating on it, in addition to the commercial development and the large scale, to develop large scale business in the biotechnology field. I'm honored and happy to be one of the members who will develop the National Science, Technology and Innovation Plan for the Kingdom from the year 2015 to 2019. And also, I would like to close my presentation by announcing that we just printed a book which is called Innovation Guideline. It's in Arabic, sorry for the non-Arabic speakers. This book is going to be at the stage of Al-Qura stand, and I'm happy and pleased to announce that our first production our first printing process just happened 3 days ago. We worked on it for almost 3.5 years. It was lots of work, lots of activities, and we'll be very happy and pleased for you to take a free copy for this book, though I encourage that you download it in your phone. It's an electronic book. For those who need to have a hard copy, you may communicate with Dr. Christie. Dr. Christie, stand up, please. So just give her your contact details, and she is going to send you a free copy. This book is an interactive book, so when you read the book, there is some spaces that you have to fill up, and at the end of reading the book, you might have an excellent idea that can be a business-oriented idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Al-Mubarak, for this excellent, rich presentation that put us in the first step to think about innovations and creativity, and opens our appetite for more about this topic. And thank you for finishing on time. Now we will move into our next presentation with our next distinguished speaker, Professor Ashley Stevens. Professor Stevens has a Doctor of Philosophy from Oxford University. He has widely lectured and traveled, and is currently the president of Focus IP Group and affiliated with the School of Management at Boston University in Technology Transfer Strategy. Professor Stevens currently chairs the Patent Committee at the Forsyth Institute, which is a dental research organization affiliated with the Harvard Medical School, and also a consultant at King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia on IP policy. He has also worked in the biotechnology industry as a co-founder of Ketogenics Incorporation and of GeneMap Incorporation, and was the vice president of business development for Biotechnical International. Today he will present to us on technology transfer opportunities in oral health research. Please welcome Professor Ashley Stevens.
Thank you, and I do want to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to come here and bringing me to this lovely city for the first time, and I also want to thank them for their considerable hospitality since we've been here. Can I have the first slide, please? So I'm going to talk to you, first of all, about funding for dental research. Then I'm going to try and think about some of the unique aspects of dental research that will allow you to apply your creativity and innovation to coming up with novel products and services. As you heard, I am currently working with the Forsyth Dental Institute, and so I'll talk a little bit about some of the innovations that we've had coming out of there. A company called Fitoral, a vaccine company, and some work we're doing on salivary diagnostics. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we manage technology at the Forsyth Institute. As you heard, I have some experience working with dental schools. I ran the technology transfer office at Boston University for 15 years, and of course, we have the Henry M. Goldman School of Dental Medicine, founded in 1958 as part of the School of Medicine, independent a few years later, has 250 faculty, 800 students, and it is known for its applied professional experience program. And it has 2 clinics which provide dental care to Boston University staff and students. And then I've also been working with the Forsyth Institute for about 3 years now. Forsyth is a very interesting organization. It was founded in 1914 to provide dental care for the poor children of Boston. It is now affiliated with the Harvard Medical School. It has 35 principal investigators. It used to occupy a gorgeous building next door to the Museum of Fine Arts in the Fenway region of Boston, but recently sold that and moved to some very high-tech facilities near the Kendall Square Innovation Hub in Cambridge. It operates now a dental clinic in that region, and it's also had an interesting, as I'll tell you in a moment, an interesting relationship with Kuwait. So first I want to start out by talking about the funding for dental research. Because by and large, inventions track research funding. The more research you do, all other things being equal, the more inventions you should come up with. Now, the bulk of biomedical funding in the US comes from the National Institutes of Health, which in 2012 had a $30 billion budget. And that is about 50% of the total federal funding of research at US universities, the National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, the defense agencies accounting for the rest. And this is where the money went. And I kind of distinguished this into, and I'll illustrate on this slide over here, things that I call disease or organ specific, and then other. And you can see the disease organ specific is roughly 2/3 of the budget, and the general is 1/3. And you can kind of see the priorities here. Cancer is the highest level of funding, allergy and infectious diseases next, heart, lung, and blood, and so on down the line here. And you can see where we shape up. Dental and craniofacial is the lowest. I suspect in the grand scheme of things, we can't particularly argue with that. Dental disease can make you uncomfortable, but it's probably not going to kill you. And they do put the bulk of the funding into the real life-threatening disorders. Okay? Yeah. So let's think about the implications of this for technology transfer. This is data from the Association of University Technology Managers annual survey for 2011. And you can see total funding for US universities was about $61 billion. We got about 21,000 invention disclosures, filed 13,000 new patent applications, did about 6,000 deals, got about 5,000 patents issued, and just under 700 startups. So now we can start to compute some metrics here. So you can see we spent about $2.8 million to get one invention disclosure. That figure is reasonably constant between the US, Canada, and it's a little higher in Europe. But then I've been doing some work recently in Chile, and either Chilean scientists are much more, are better scientists than American scientists, or they're paid less, but there it's about $1 million of research to get one invention disclosure. So if we look at now the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, which has its budget, as we said, of $411 million, then we should expect to get across the whole of the US about 146 invention disclosures pertaining to dental issues, file about 90 patents, do about 40 deals, and start about 4 companies. And when you go to Forsyth, which has a budget of $22 million, and I think is the biggest single recipient of funding from the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, it would expect to get about 8 invention disclosures a year, do about 2 deals, and do 1 startup every 5 years. So that gives you some sense of the scale of this. I want to start to think now about the unique aspects of dentistry. So if you think about clinical practice, it's all about pain management, isn't it? We all hear that the best a dentist can do is to not hurt you. And if you think about it, dentists made one of the, I would argue, the 3 most important medical advances ever, namely anesthesia. So William Thomas Green Morton at the Massachusetts General Hospital, Etherdome did the first experiment. And if you ever go to Boston, by the way, MGH has created a wonderful museum. It's right by the Charles Street station. And they actually have one of Morton's ether masks. They're not sure whether it's the one that did the first operation, but it is one of his. And I do urge you to go and see it. Now, when you get onto research in dentistry, it has certain unique advantages. It has, I think, I would argue, areas of unique strength. First of all, for instance, new drugs can be tested topically in the mouth. That is a great advantage in testing stuff if you don't have to worry about systemic issues. So I think a lot of radically new technologies get tested either in the eyeball first, because that is a very constrained environment, and again, you don't have to worry about systemic issues, or in the mouth. So Tom Van Dyke, who I work with both at Boston University and who is now at Forsyth, has had a wonderful collaboration with an immunologist called Charles Sahan at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and they did the first human testing, Tom did the first human testing of 2 classes of immunotherapeutics, of anti-inflammatory drugs that Dr. Sahan came up with, the lipoxins and the resolvins. So there is a very great advantage of dental research. And so this is because the oral cavity also allows the least invasive route to diagnostic samples. You can take a cheek swab for cellular samples to access somebody's DNA, and then you can take a saliva sample for fluid samples, again, easier even than doing a blood stick. And then dental research is highly focused. Most dental health, after all, is related to microbiology, either caries, gingivitis, and then periodontitis, and I'm proud there to see that Ann Tanner has a bug named after her that she discovered at Forsyth. Now, if you think about it, a bacterium needs to adhere to the tooth or gum before it can start to do its evil work. And so dental research has been, came up with a number of bacterial cell adhesion molecules. I was very involved with mammalian cell adhesion molecules in the early 1990s, and it was noticeable that dentists have made a great contribution on the bacterial side of this. And then the bacteria, once they've adhered, they penetrate the gum, and you get cytokine release, monocyte recruitment and adhesion, and then finally you get inflammation. And dental researchers have made major contributions in all three of these areas. For instance, in inflammation, obviously one of the most important molecules, commercially important molecules, is TNF-alpha. And the anti-TNF alpha market is well over $20 billion now, and enormous advances in treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. And there are only two transcription regulators for TNF-alpha. NF-kappa B, discovered at the Harvard Medical School, with a list of, I think, 9 inventors on the core patent, starting and ending with a Nobel Prize winner. And then the second one was LETAF, which was discovered by Dr. Solomon Amar at Boston University Dental School. And Sal is continuing to look for ways to develop therapeutics to modulate the unique properties of LETAF. And then, of course, calcium metabolism is important to dental health. In tooth decay and in periodontal disease, alveolar bone erosion. And then restoratives, ceramic compositions. So here's an example. At Boston University, the key expertise in ceramics is not where you might expect it in the College of Engineering or the School of Chemistry, but it is in the School of Dental Medicine. And Dr. Russell Giordano invented this compound, this material, enamic, which has been on the market from Vitazan in Germany now. And it combines flexibility with great strength, and is able to absorb the forces of our jaws chewing to a great extent. And it's easily machined, so it goes into this next generation of in-the-office CAD/CAM machining of implants and restoratives. It's a polymer-infused ceramic network that Dr. Giordano came up with. And a silane treatment causes the ceramic to adhere to the polymer, was the unique advance that Dr. Giordano made. And so the key challenge is preserving sufficient space as you do this, as you create the matrix, to be able to infuse a monomer that you can then cure to create the very hard restorative. This, I will have to say, was one of my major frustrations at Boston University. When I got there in 1995, the patent had already been filed 6 months earlier. And unfortunately, we had to file a continuation after 1995. So we now get 20 years from this date, not 17 years from when the patent issues. And whenever I would ask Russell, how's Vitazan doing with this? He said, it's going to be on the market in 6 months. He said that in 1995, he said it in 97, he said it in 99, he kept on saying it. And so our patent expires in 2014, and the product was only launched in 2013. So we're going to get about 2 years of effective patent life on this. Photoral, this is a professional and consumer device for improved periodontal health. This is what it looks like. So it's a blue light emitting device that you will put in your mouth for 60 seconds in the morning, or perhaps 2 minutes in the morning and in the evening. And this bright blue light is conducted down your teeth into the periodontal tissue, and it kills the periodontal pathogens. Which of us would not put up with the inconvenience of 60 seconds in the morning and 60 seconds at night to save a visit to the periodontist? I apologize to the periodontists in the audience. It was invented by Max Goodson and Nikos Soukos at Forsyth. We filed a provisional patent application in May 2006. We got our patent issued in September 2011, about 5 years. So we have protection on this till 2027. There's our patent. And the commercialization was through a little company called Fatoral, a startup company incorporated in August 2011. It was kind of a Greek deal. Nikos is Greek. The entrepreneur, Stamatis Astros, is Greek. And I think the money that went into it was from the local Greek community in Boston. And I say that to illustrate that a lot of innovation is personal. The motto of the Office of Technology Transfer at Boston University these days is maximize collisions, people bumping into each other and talking, and to minimize friction. So we signed the license in 2011, and I have to say, I'm not sure I've ever seen a company move quite as fast as this. He had a prototype developed in time for that January's Yankee Dental Conference, which was wonderful in terms of being able to attract the attention of key opinion leaders. And we did the first efficacy testing in less than a year from signing the license. And we got a distribution agreement with a global dental products company that I don't think has been publicly identified yet, in just over a year later. As I told Forsyth, the biggest problem that this gives us is that every future transaction will be judged against this one, and I think will not measure up. Nuvax is actually not in Boston, it's in Kingston, Ontario, founded by a guy who came from the vaccine industry in Canada's flourishing biotechnology industry. Has 13 employees, did a license in March 2011, and it is a glucosyl transferase 1 vaccine against dental caries, invented by Dan Smith and Martin Taubman at Forsyth. And it is joint with the Henry M. Jackson Foundation for Military Medicine, which is a private 501c3, which does technology transfer for the US government's United Services Hospital in the Washington, D.C. area. They raised $20 million from a Chinese pharmaceutical company, because I think this is a product that is going to be for the developing world, where dental care is not good. And so the Chinese partnership, I think, is entirely appropriate. They formed a joint venture called Nuvax SL Biopharmaceuticals to develop this. And they bought a former DSM vaccine manufacturing plant in Montreal to be able to produce the early quantities of this vaccine. I'm sorry. And we have a contract from the Canadian National Research Council. And very interestingly, this is an area that has been a lot of interest to me, is the issues of how we take innovation to the developing world, which cannot afford to pay the prices for patent-protected medicines and diagnostics that we can in the developed world. I did a lot of work on this several years back, and I was very pleased to see that this agreement, when I got to Forsyth, contains global health provisions to allow it to be bought, to be manufactured and sold on a cost-plus basis, not a patent monopoly basis, in the developing world. Well, saliva is a diagnostic platform. I would argue it's superior to urine. It's more concentrated. It hasn't been processed through the kidneys, and so you're going to get a more representative sample of what's going on in the body. It contains all the normal protein hormones from blood that you would expect, and urine only passes proteins under conditions of advanced kidney disease, so you have a real advantage here in looking at saliva. It contains protein cytokines from the blood, TNF-alpha and so forth, and it has a metabolic profile very similar to blood. So we were able at Forsyth to get a $4.1 million contract from the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center, and Max Goodson said in simplistic terms, saliva can be considered a dilute solution of blood. Everything found in blood can be found in saliva. That makes it a great diagnostic platform. Now, saliva is already important in diagnostics, obviously oral health diagnostics, and then a number of infectious disease diagnostics are done through saliva samples. Various hormone analysis is done through saliva, and drug and alcohol testing can be done through saliva. And what we're going to do is to work on characterizing diagnostically important proteins that are found in saliva that you're not going to be able to find in blood. Interestingly, Forsyth has had a partnership with Kuwait that started over 30 years ago. And we've helped Kuwait set up a series of pediatric clinics throughout the country. And more recently, we've created a partnership with the Dasman Diabetes Institute, and we're doing research in metabolic syndrome, the precursor to diabetes. And we have the Kuwait Healthy Life Study, and we have a longitudinal cohort investigation of some 8,000 children going on, looking at their saliva and looking for predictive biomarkers for the transition to, from metabolic syndrome to full diabetes. Now, I talked about the expertise of dental researchers in microbiology, and tuberculosis obviously is not an oral disease, but it is a very important disease. It killed 2 billion people over a 150-year period, which is it's a wonderful book if you want to learn more about tuberculosis. And 1.4 million people die from TB annually, mainly in the developed world. And that is more people than die from malaria, and certainly more people than die from HIV. A third of the globe is infected with tuberculosis, but fortunately most people, the infection is inactive and not active. It's a latent infection. And it re-erupts for unknown reasons in a relatively small percentage of people. And cases and deaths have been declining since 2002, but we have had this major problem emerging of multi-drug resistant, which generally means resistant to 2 drugs, and then extremely drug resistant, which means resistant to 3 or more drugs. That has been resurrecting fears. And this is, you know, as people say, you are only one airplane ride away from anywhere in the world, and this has been starting to emerge in the developed world. And we are even, and this is very worrying, we're starting to see resistance to artemisinin, which, as you know, the World Health Organization has been recommending that people be treated with combination therapies, and artemisinin has been the primary antibiotic additive used with that. And we've only had 1 new drug in 40 years, which is a fairly tough drug that just came out from Johnson & Johnson. So diagnosing TB is important, and we need the methods to be at the point of care. Most of the current methods are old: culture, sputum, X-ray. They're slow, they're inaccurate. Cefade's Gene Expert TB test has revolutionized the field. It's a PCR-based test. It detects both the multi-drug and the extreme drug-resistant variants of TB. A lot of funding from UNITAID has gone into lowering the cost of this. I think it's down to about $13 a test, which is still a great deal for a developing country. And it is still not a frontline test. You can't do this at a health clinic with poor electrical supply and poor refrigeration out in the countryside or the forest. It is central lab-based. And so the unmet market need is for an accurate point-of-care test for active TB infection. A lot of the tests show you whether you've got a latent infection or if you had an infection. What you need to find are the people who have an active infection and need to be treated right now. So we have identified 6 proteins that are shed by Mycobacterium tuberculosis as it reproduces. So that is indicative of active infection. It's detectable in urine, and we are looking to see if it is in sputum now. We have funding from the PPP that develops novel diagnostics, the Foundation for Innovative Novel Diagnostics. And we are characterizing the sensitivity and specificity of these, first individually and then putting them together in a panel. Now, they are present in very low concentration. And so this really does present a challenge to your ability to identify these things. And so we've been working with a company called Quanterix in Massachusetts, which has developed probably the most sensitive system to quantitate proteins that's yet been developed. And we are collaborating with them to characterize the TB proteins. And I'll finish up with a few words about how we manage technology transfer at Forsyth. They've been active in transferring technology for many, many years. Here's their record of patent filings. You can see they've been getting 1 to 2 to 3 patents a year, which, as I showed you earlier, is about the level you would expect from their volume of research funding. But my first contact was in 1986, when I was at a company called Biotechnica International, and we collaborated with Forsyth to develop DNA probe diagnostics for periodontal pathogens with a number of, with Ron Gibbons and Sig Sokransky were the PIs there. But that filing patents is different from having an organized technology transfer capability. What Forsyth did was essentially pay for the patenting of their faculty inventions. And quite honestly, as we looked at it, they frequently over-patented and overpaid. There was no institutional commercial support. The professors were on their own. So we've implemented a new system. It was led by Karen Mullen, who is the general counsel, who I had worked with at Boston University and who moved across town. And we have a manager who is a master's level scientist who turned out was taking my course, Bench to Bedside, at Boston University School of Management. And when I asked Forsyth if they would like to see if some of my students would like to help them, and we use students, graduate students in our office at BU a great deal, they said, oh, would you? And when I made the offer, this guy came up and said, well, you've probably forgotten this, Dr. Stevens, but I work at Forsyth. I'd love to do this. So he's moved over and he does it 2 days a week. That's about the level of capacity we need. It allows him to evaluate all the new inventions that come in, do a thorough, rigorous analysis, and to develop marketing pieces for marketing the technologies we already have. And then we have an executive patent committee. I chair that committee, and the president's on it, certain key Forsyth scientists. And then we added 2 venture capitalists from the Boston community, Jonathan Fleming and Andrew Jay, who works for Siemens Venture and was actually a practicing dentist. So he is absolutely perfect. And then we have 2 product development entrepreneurs, Michael Palfreman and Sean Burke. And it turns out that what I did here was Fleming and Palfreman come from the drug development side, and Jay and Burke come from the device side. So we kind of have both of the aspects of Forsyth technologies covered. The key tools of rigorous first look technology assessment, looking at the marketing aspects and the technology development aspects and the patent aspects of each invention as it comes through the door, and then coming up with a non-confidential marketing description, something that focuses on the value proposition in the technology that we can use with prospective interested parties. Impact, the scientists have told us that they now feel supported. We have changed the culture. They used to feel they were on their own. Now they feel the institution understands them and supports them. We have drastically reduced the cost of patenting. We are taking more efficient patenting decisions, and the 2 venture capitalists and the 2 product development specialists serve without compensation. They are pleased to do it. They enjoy it. It's part of the innovation ecosystem in Boston. And we have technologies moving towards commercialization, and hopefully that will bring with it some future revenues to support the research mission of Forsyth. So thank you for listening, and I believe questions will be later. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for this nice and richful presentation, which is more specialized in oral health. And as we mentioned in the beginning of the session, that discussion will be at the end of this session for all the speakers. Now we will move into our third presentation that will be presented by Professor Cale Lennon. Professor Cale Lennon is a director licensing in the Office of Technology Transfer at Emory University. During his 14 years tenure in the University Technology Transfer, Professor Lennon has managed the licensing of multiple biomedical related technologies, including therapeutics, medical devices, diagnostics, genomics, and software and research tools. While at Emory, he has been responsible for developing and leading various functional units within the office, including licensing and patent management, MTA contracting, compliance, and marketing. And prior to joining Emory, Professor Lennon was in the Office of Technology Transfer and Business Development at Tulane University, where he held the position of Senior Licensing Associate, Associate Director, and Interim Executive Director. He earned an MBA from Tulane University and a doctorate in genetics and molecular biology from Emory University. Professor Lennon holds the Certified Licensing Professional and Certified Research Administrator credentials. Today, the topic of his presentation will be Building Your Brand as a Technology Innovator. Please welcome Professor Cale Lennon.
So I'd like to first thank you and acknowledge the members of the organizing committee for the meeting and for putting on such an exceptional event. And I would also like to thank all of my hosts for the exquisite hospitality that you've shown. And we will start with the first slide. Well, while the slide is being loaded up, I'll tell a quick story. Yesterday, I got into the airport from a very long flight, and there were students there to greet me and to take care of me, and they did an excellent job. And so they led me to the car to take me to the hotel. And I got in this car, and it was a brand new Cadillac. And I know that Saudi Arabia is a very prosperous country, but I was very surprised that a young dental student was driving this very nice new car, and so I complimented on him, and he said, the car is being provided by a sponsor, and I think that is a great idea. It's very innovative, but that was definitely a memorable moment that occurred, and I see the slides are up. So Dr. Sultan mentioned Thomas Edison, and I'm going to continue the story about him. So Thomas Edison is one of the most famous American inventors, and he used electricity as an artist would use canvas and paint to create devices which changed society technologically. Now, these included the long-lasting incandescent light bulb and also the quadruplex telegraph. And Thomas Edison realized that electricity would change the world. And he also understood that there would be great fortune to be made in both generating electricity and distributing it. And you mentioned you heard in the previous talk the lab, the research and development lab that Edison set up. So he set up his development lab in Menlo Park, New Jersey, and I'm sure everyone can understand that it must have been a very exciting place to work. In a sense, it had the same type of atmosphere as the new technology startup companies have today. but things probably moved at a slightly slower pace. Now, there was a young student at the time from 1876 to 1878 who was studying in New York City, and he actually became friends with some of Edison's technicians. And so every once in a while, he would take the train from New York down to Menlo Park, and it was just a 60-kilometer ride, so it wasn't that long. And he would visit his friends, and he would visit the lab, and he would see experiments being done. And he actually saw some of the very first working incandescent light bulbs. And this student became fascinated with electricity. Now, this student, was an individual by the name of Charles Edmund Cale, and he was actually a dental student at the New York Dental College. Now, Dr. Cale was from a prominent family in New Orleans, Louisiana, and that is actually the city where I started my career at Tulane University. New Orleans is a large major port. It can be very hot and humid there, so there's some similarities between New Orleans and Jeddah. And it's a very unique city in that the majority of it is underwater. It has its own musical heritage, and it also has the longest continuously running streetcar system in the world. And so when Dr. Cale was setting up his practice, he saw that electricity was changing life in the city. And the horse-drawn streetcars that you see here were eventually replaced with electric streetcars in 1893. Here's Dr. Cale in his office. And Cale was a visionary like Thomas Edison because he recognized that electricity had the ability to transform dentistry. And he was one of the first dentists in America to actually bring electricity into his office. He set up electric lights for examination. He also brought in the first electric dental drills. And he also implemented an invention that had been discovered by Wilhelm Röntgen in 1896. That's the X-ray. And so he was actually one of the first dentists in the United States to use X-rays. X-rays require electricity. What's shown in the bottom picture is an X-ray film holder that Dr. Cale invented. Now, he also brought electric suction to dentistry. He developed a vacuum pump device, and it had wands on the end of it, and this is actually the patent for one of his wands. And this was able to then, drain saliva out of the mouth using electricity. And what's interesting about this is that suction actually made its way from dentistry to surgery, because previously the surgical sponge was used in surgery. But when surgeons saw this device, they realized that it could be very helpful in doing surgery. And so this actually replaced the surgical sponge. So Dr. Cale was an innovator in that he was able to embrace a revolutionary technology and apply it to the field of dentistry. And what's interesting is that his application actually expanded beyond dentistry, as I mentioned. Now, what I want to explore with you is the same model that Dr. Cale used. And I'd like to examine, first of all, some important trends that are happening in the innovation cycle in the life sciences industry. I will then talk to you about some interesting opportunities that are available for academic scientists who want to do research with the end result being the development of new technologies. And then finally, I hope to convey to all of you certain strategies that you can use to be innovators in developing these new technologies. So having spent most of my working career in technology transfer, I've had the opportunity and the privilege to work with several innovators. And what actually is shown here is the Rub al Khali Desert in the kingdom. And it's a beautiful landscape, beautiful scenery. And so I would say this is definitely one of your great natural resources. And actually, on the ride yesterday with the student, we were talking about another natural resource being petroleum, and how the price of gas is so much more less expensive here. But What's nice about this natural resource is that it's very beautiful, very scenic. It takes a long time to go from the laboratory to the marketplace, and it can be a difficult journey, as is the case in crossing a desert like this. It's very beautiful, but the climate is inhospitable. And so what we do in technology transfer is actually to work with faculty members, innovators, and to help them bridge a very difficult journey from the lab to having their products become commercialized. And as I said, it can take a long time. Now, there have been several faculty members that I have spoken with at Emory that constantly tell me about the challenges in the United States for obtaining traditional academic basic research funding. And this has been funded by the National Institutes of Health, as Dr. Ashley mentioned. There have been faculty members who taught me when I was a PhD student at Emory who've actually had to shut down their research lab and retire because they could not obtain funding to keep the labs open. However, in contrast to the very challenging environment for basic research funding, I want to let you know that there's some real opportunities that are emerging for investigators who want to do work that is more applied and translational in nature. And so let me set the stage for why this is so. So the bellwether industry in life sciences has always been the pharmaceutical industry. And it's accurate to state that this is an industry that has done a great deal of good to mankind. It's been highly profitable. It's created a lot of wealth for the individuals who own shares in those companies. However, it's been a very rocky road for Big Pharma during the last 5 to 7 years. And basically, what the crisis is that Big Pharma has a productivity crisis. As we would say, this industry is not getting as much bang for its buck anymore. And so where it used to be that the number of NCEs, or new chemical entities, the number of those resulted from, let's say, $1 billion, over time that has dropped and continued to drop. And so with this crisis, basically, and the increasing cost to develop drugs, coupled with the fact that pharmaceutical companies do not have new drugs in their pipeline, so they're not going to be new revenues to replace the revenues that are lost, Big Pharma has had to radically alter its business model. And the result has been a loss of 170,000 pharmaceutical jobs in the United States over the last 5 years. Now, in addition to the cut in the labor force, the drug companies also scaled back on their research and development arms. And so basically now Big Pharma is a manufacturing, distribution, marketing, and sales-oriented venture. And the pipeline for its new products, they're coming from the outside sources. And so this is where the opportunity lies. Because of this fundamental shift, there is a great desire on the part of pharmaceutical companies to partner with academia. And so what is shown here are some of the partnerships that were done in 2012, and different companies have taken different strategies. Companies like GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, and Sanofi, they have done multiple partnerships. But then other companies, such as Merck, has taken a different tact where they've done one big partnership. And so this is actually representative of the California Institute for Biomedical Research. This was funded in 2012 as well. And Merck put $90 million behind creating this venture. So about a week ago at Emory, we had an event that we have every year, and it was to honor our faculty inventors. And for our keynote speaker, Mr. Chris Yoakum, who is actually the Principal Alliance Manager at AstraZeneca, came and talked at our event. And flexibility and creativity and risk sharing, these are all themes that he echoed to us in talking about the eagerness of these companies to enter into these partnerships with universities. And our Vice President of Research was at the event, and he asked the question, well, how can Emory University get one of these large partnerships? And myself and a couple of colleagues sort of laughed because we knew he was going to ask the question, because what university in this climate would not want to have one of these multi-million-dollar partnerships? And Chris Yoakum's answer was the following. He said, well, your faculty members attend the major events in their fields, the major academic conferences, and AstraZeneca will send 30, sometimes 40 technical representatives to these conferences as well. And their goal is to actually build collaborations with academic scientists who are conducting research in areas that are of interest to the company. And so what he said really is very true. It's all about the relationships. If you have these relationships that start, those can lead to the large partnerships. So what I'd like to talk about now is another model that is emerging and is relevant, and this is the venture philanthropy model. And basically, this is primarily emerging in the disease-focused foundations. And so in this diagram, that would be the venture philanthropy practitioner, and then the social purpose organization, that's actually the university. And the way this works is that private foundations are fundamentally changing the way that they operate. They are doing more projects that have milestones, that are milestone-driven, and also they are providing a lot more support resources. They're providing legal support, they're providing regulatory support, things like that. In addition, you have other funders, such as companies, that are coming in to enter into these types of collaborations. And ironically, where it's gotten easier to work with pharmaceutical companies, it's actually gotten a little more challenging, or become a little more challenging to work with the foundations, because they're taking this more active role. They also want to have a return from their investment as far as the money that they put in. But on the whole, this is a very good model, and the foundations add a lot of value because they are very well connected both to key opinion leaders and also to companies for their specific disease areas of interest. Translational research is another trend, and this is basically the bench to bedside and back model. And the National Institutes of Health in the United States has actually recently developed a brand new center that is focused on translational research, and they are providing over $500 million of dedicated funding specifically to that. So I mentioned how Dr. Cale was a student of technology trends in his day and how those could be applied to dentistry. And in addition to the development of new therapeutics and medicines, there's also a trend that we're seeing in faculty being involved in developing new technologies in the information technology space. And Atlanta, Georgia, where I live, has developed a reputation now for being a hotbed for healthcare information technology startup companies. So this is another emerging area that can be considered to do active research in. And when I was doing my research, I also ran across the concept of dental informatics. And of course, this is merging several disciplines, computer science, information science, cognitive science, into an IT-based platform. And the output basically is the way to benefit the dental practice, the education of dental students, and research as well. And here is an interesting partnership that I found. So this is a partnership that was announced back in December, and it involved 3 American university dental schools, the University of North Carolina, the University of Pittsburgh, and the University of Michigan. And they actually partnered up with ICE Health Systems to develop a comprehensive dental record system. And so this is an example of a company partnership in the IT space. Well, you don't have to necessarily develop one of these large enterprise systems. Apps are also very much of interest, and those can be developed, as everyone knows, either on the Apple platform or on the Droid platform. And if you look at the relative cost to develop these compared to running a biomedical research lab, they're quite inexpensive. So from this data, 70% of apps are developed for a cost of under $100,000. So that's another area to consider potentially developing new technology in. And finally, I'll just mention biomarkers. So when Chris Yoakum was giving his keynote address, he basically said that biomarkers are huge right now. The most valuable ones are the biomarkers that actually direct a course of therapy. And so the concept of personalized dentistry obviously fits into this area. And the organizers of this conference astutely included biomarkers as part of the topic. So finally, what I'll do is end by giving you some strategies to build your brand as an innovator. Now, we're all familiar with the brands of products, and tomorrow I'll be talking about one of the most recognized consumer brands in the country. You'll have to come back tomorrow to find out who it is. And individuals can also have a brand. It's the way that we are perceived professionally. It's the way that individuals know us for our talents and our skills. And so I hope that I've provided evidence so far that there is opportunity to develop new technologies for investigators that want to do that. But how do you go about building your brand as an innovator? Well, let me give you some suggestions from my experience. The first of all is to prototype. And what's shown here is actually a picture of Wilbur and Orville Wright. And they were flying an early version of the airframe that they went on to develop the first heavier-than-air powered aircraft. And prototyping is very important in all fields. It's important to develop medical devices, dental instruments, and prostheses, and technologies like that. And it accomplishes several things. First of all, it provides credibility and believability to your potential commercial partners that you've actually achieved proof of principle. And also, it's very important from an intellectual property protection standpoint, because you want to have the features of your invention worked out. Once those have been worked out, your patent attorney then can plot a strategy to know exactly how to try to patent your innovation. But without those details, it can be very challenging. Another strategy is what I will say is size up the competition. And often we have investigators that come to us with a new invention, be it a drug or a medical device, and they have outstanding scientific data. But very often there's one key experiment they haven't done, and that is basically to compare their technology to the state-of-the-art commercial product. And this is very important. You know, companies want to see this. They want to see how a technology sizes up to the competition. And so this is one of the strongest selling points you can have. Another strategy is to use experimental models that are actually preferred by industry. And so there are various models that academic scientists use, and they're widely accepted in the field. And that's important because when a scientist goes to publish their data, they want to have a validated and well-accepted model. Well, sometimes what we found is that pharmaceutical companies may feel that an academically accepted model is not the best one for their purposes. And so how do you find out what's the best model? Well, when you're setting up collaborations or when you're just meeting individuals from companies, it's good to talk to them about things like that because, again, generating data that they're comfortable with and that they think is most valid is an important strategy. There was a comment made about trial and failures, and so what I'll say is be patient and persistent. This is Sir James Dyson, and he built $1 billion business from selling vacuum cleaners. And it took him 15 years to actually come up with what he thought was the best design. And during those 15 years, 5,127 prototypes. So that's a lot of design iterations. Now, he may have been a perfectionist to the extreme, but he did yield success. And so his persistence is a good, it's a good example, and especially because it's such a long road to have technologies make it to the marketplace, as I mentioned. And finally, have a strong value proposition. So the workshop that I'm going to teach tomorrow is going to be talking about the value proposition, and not to give too much away, but basically what that means is that it's what defines the strengths of your technology, how you're better than the competition, and basically what makes individuals say, I want that. And so Square is a company that has an outstanding value proposition. And this is basically a point-of-sale company that allows you to do credit card or debit card transactions from your smartphone. And so if you look at this, it's very simply and elegantly stated, but it's very powerful. Accepts payments everywhere. So finally, let me summarize what I've said. One strategy to becoming an innovator is to recognize changes. Look around yourself and ask, what are the important changes that are happening that are transforming society? Next, look inside of yourself and say, well, how can I apply those changes to my field of interest, be it dentistry in this case? Now, take advantage and explore the partnership opportunities I mentioned with companies. And then finally, focus on your brand recognition so that you can be recognized as a researcher who is generating new and valuable discoveries. And if you keep these in mind, then you will definitely be on the path to becoming an innovator. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lennon. May I ask our distinguished speaker to come up to the podium and have seat in these chairs for the discussion. We have with us our first speaker, Professor Sultan Al-Mubarak, who presented on how to enhance your creativity and innovations. And we have also Professor Stevens, our second speaker, who presented on technology transfer opportunities in oral health research. And also we have Professor Lennon, our last speaker, who presented on building your brand as a technology innovator. It's open now for discussion, and we will start having questions from our respected audience. So please, if you have a question, you may raise your hand and the microphone will be presented to you. Okay, we have a question from the female side. And please, our organizers, if you have the microphone, please state your name and your question. Thank you. And to whom your question is, please.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Sara Fateh. I'm a periodontist at King Faisal Specialist Hospital. My question is to Dr. Al-Mubarak. In regards to innovation and creativity, to start off with a patency here in Saudi Arabia, could you talk a little bit about the process of how to start that process here?
Could you talk about processes for creativity? Was this your question?
Can you repeat the question, please?
How do we start a patency here in Saudi Arabia if I wish to start off something new?
Patency, you're talking about patents, right?
Yes.
Okay. Again, if I just may ask Dr. Christie to stand up and introduce yourself. There is a book which we just published at the King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, which talks about all aspects and gives also telephone numbers and contact details for all the sectors that are involved with creation and innovation, whether it's a private sector or governmental sector or semi-governmental sectors. Again, talking about the patent office, we do have two patent offices in Saudi Arabia. One is the GCC patent office located in Riyadh, and the other Saudi patent office, which is located at the King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology. There has been lots of changes within the patent office, but it's positive changes. I'm pleased to announce that by the end of last year, we became the 147 countries to join the PCT at the WIPO. So now if you file your patent in Saudi Arabia, you will be protected in among any of these countries that you would like to have your protection at. It's explained in details within the book that I published. And talking also about patents, there's a few organizations and institutions that may give you financial as well as logistic support to file your patent if it looks commercially viable. So out of 100 patents, there might be less than 5% of patents that would be commercially viable. So usually you go through an evaluation for your patent, and this may, and if your patent looks to be commercially viable, then you might have a client that will inject some support to it, whether it is logistic or financial support or both. Did I answer your question?
Yes, but I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind. After you start your patency, and it goes through the process, and you look for a compounding pharmaceutical, I don't know, company or people who actually compound things that are not out in the market. Do we have that also?
Okay, I have to make a very important comment, and thank you for raising that question. It's a very important question. Usually for most, if not all the startups, I hope that you know that term, which is the valley of death. For most of the startups, there is a valley of death. However, in the medical sector, this valley of death is deeper and wider. What I mean by that is the investment is larger more. There is lots of logistic issues that needs to be provided, as well as regulatory issues. So the Saudi Food and Drug Authority, you have to take permission from once you are in different stages, whether to do the stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3. And also there is some financial support, which in the pharmaceutical aspect, some of the companies, I mean, just giving an example for some of the drug companies like Pfizer, there is some, when we are talking about Exupra, which is an insulin spray, they spent more than 3.5 billion US dollar on that medication, and they decided to pull it off the market because it didn't work. So when I was chairing the incubator, the biotechnology incubator, I tend to focus more on the medical equipment more than the pharmaceutical, because of several reasons, but one of it is the investment is a lot. Our thinking as an investor here within the kingdom is yet to the traditional investment, which is the real estate, the stock market. However, in the biotechnology sector, though it has a high risk, yet it is one of the highest return globally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Sultan. Professor Mubarak. If we have question from the male side, we have one question there. If somebody please give the mic, and then we will come to you, Dr.
Oh, my name is Syed Shahabuddin from Al-Mubarak University. I have a question to the panel. If there is an innovation which is very regional specific, for example, if there's a biomarker which is only found in a Saudi population, can you file a US patent or an international patent?
Yeah, please, Professor.
Well, I'm sure a lawyer would be happy to take your money and file a patent wherever you ask him to. Whether it would have commercial value remains to be seen. You have to remember that a patent protects both the sale and the manufacture of a product. So you need to not only look at where the sale of this product would take place, and it sounds from the example you gave us that that would be Saudi, but then the issue is where would it be manufactured? So you're seeing a lot of US universities in, let's say, the electronic space, file patents in India and in China, not because they're concerned about the markets there, but because they're concerned about products being manufactured there and then being imported into the US.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Professor Shamrani, you have a question, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I would like to thank Al-Mubarak Dental School for this meeting, which comes time, really. My question addressed to Dr. Al-Mubarak. I know that Dr. Al-Mubarak is working in this field for more than 10 years or more. My questions, really, as you know that we have more than 20 universities here in the country. We have King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology. Also, we have Ministry of Higher Education, where they have one center for innovation. My question, with this a lot of centers, and I want Dr. Mubarak to comment on this thing, is there any cooperation between these different centers, or each center they are working independent from each other? Then again, I would like again to thank Dental School here in Al-Mubarak, where they started this meeting, and I think it's coming time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, shukran. Thank you, Dr. Sahan, for your question. Again, I would like to emphasize on the National Science, Technology and Innovation Plan. We are now in the planning of the second National Science, Technology and Innovation Plan, which is going to start next year, 2015, until 2019. The first plan, though it was not successful 100%, yet we had some achievement. I'm just going to give you some examples. Talking about the patents, which was just mentioned by our colleagues. Usually we encourage the filing of patents. However, we noticed that most of the universities within the kingdom start to file many patents, with the majority just for the sake of only filing the patents without looking at the commercial viability. And CACS is paying the cost of that patent. As you know, and he just, my colleague just mentioned about the lawyer. Any lawyer would be more than happy to take care of such application and filing, because at the end, there's money gonna go to his pocket, and they are the best to know how to take money. However, the utilization of such patent, it was minimal. So in the National Science, Technology and Innovation Plan, which we are now in the process of doing it, and hopefully we'll be submitting it by September, we are trying to appoint technology transfer unit within the area here in Saudi Arabia in order to evaluate or to filter the patent application. There is more cooperation between the different governmental organizations, which is one of the weaknesses. There was kind of a overlap in some of the work, some repetition of some of the work without acknowledging one center, acknowledging the other one about the nature of their activities. And also we are participating and working with some private organization, Aramco with their WAID program, SABIC with their also other programs, Ministry of Health. We are building, or at least we're in the beginning stage of building a bioscience park with the industrial city, Ministry of Health, as well as the King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology. So there are some weaknesses, which is, normal to have it in the first stage, and we are trying to minimize or eliminate these weaknesses in the second stage, and we welcome any suggestion and or comments that you can provide to us before we submit our second plan to the higher authority.
Okay, thank you, Professor Mubarak.
There are about 15 members of the Association of University Technology Managers from Saudi Arabia. And you're seeing organizations like KFUPM, King Saud, University of Dammam, obviously KAUST, our members, and my sense is that there is sufficient momentum in technology transfer in the kingdom that it is time to form some sort of association to bring these people together periodically to discuss issues of local interest. You see this around the world. You know, South Africa has Sarima. Even small countries like Sweden, Switzerland have their own technology transfer associations. Taiwan does. My sense is that there's sufficient momentum in Saudi that it's time to start to think about doing that here.
And excuse me, Dr. Mira, by the way, talking about the budget for the NSTIP, most of the budget, although there is many sectors, water, gas, electricity, ICT, etc., but most of the budget is focused towards the biomedical and health projects, because we know that the infrastructure and the cost of such investment is relatively higher compared to other sectors.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Mubarak, Professor Stevens. We have time for only one more question. We can have it from the female side. Okay, from the male side we have, okay.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Professor Talal Halawani. I am advisor to the NSTIP, which is National Science and Technology Innovation. I just want to add it to whatever Dr. Sultan says about the NSTIP plan. Now we have the full picture. Last year the government created a special company, holding company, to manufacture some of these innovation and patents. And we finance in NSTIP, we finance various projects, basically most of them in the biomedical and nano applications. Also, now we also have many patents, around 300 patents during this first phase of the plan. Now, last year, Council of Ministers created a special company, holding company, to manufacture the enabled technology, or the commercial part of the patents or innovations that could be commercialized. And so far, we created around 5 companies, spin-off of this major company, and we are taking a leapfrog step to really manufacture the local innovation. And again, innovation here is not mature. The industry is not mature. We are facing a lot of challenges, but so far we are very successful in creating. Now, an example, we are creating now, building 30,000 cubic meter desalination plant using solar energy. We starting some invention and innovation in this plant, and what we call ultra photovoltaics. So this is just to add values, and we are funding a lot of these resources. Now we have the complete picture. We have funding the promising projects in certain technology, and basically most of them in the biotech and gas, oil, and so forth. But the second part, we are now yielding threefold of the number of inventors, of inventions in the country. Also a lot of publication, ISI publication. The third part, which has been completed, the complete cycle of conducting applied research, getting invention, and then commercialize it or manufacture it in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Dr. Sultan.
Just make a comment. Thank you, Dr. Alwani, for your comment. But since we are in a medical theme, what I'm just trying to focus on is usually the average persons within Saudi Arabia, they don't, or they are not familiar about the medical inventions or the medical startups. At CACS, we're supporting the different fields, including medical and biomedical inventions. However, we just need to show a model, what we call a success story, to the public, to the average people, in order to be familiar how such investment can give a good return for the investor, for the entrepreneur. Just to give an example, we have one case that Dr. Khalid Rubayyan, which is one of the famous diabetologists, and he's very well known, and he's making a dressing for diabetic foot ulcers, taken from the shrimp for and we talked to the National Prawn Company, and they injected some cash. They injected like around 12 million to his company. They took certain percentage, and he took certain percentage, and we also finance at CACS the patent for such invention, and we believe that within the next 2 to 3 years it's going to be hopefully commercially available. As I said, the problem with biomedical inventions that it takes longer time compared to other traditional investment. So we have to be patient. Solar energy, as he just mentioned, it's a very good example. We have one city which is called Al-Khafji. It's going to be totally equipped with solar energy for electricity power. But in the medical, we need to focus our media attention to it in order to shift the attention of the normal persons to such investment and to the high return for such investment.
Thank you, Professor Al-Mubarak. Actually, because of the matter of time, I think we will conclude our session here. Although we have a lot of questions and raised hands, and I personally have questions, but I will ask you in person after the session. We know that we have a break time now, and as we started 10 minutes late, we will give you 10 more minutes for the break. So we will end our session now, and at the end of this session, I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Professor Al-Mubarak, Professor Stevens, Professor Lennon, for their interesting, valuable, and very informative presentations about creation and innovations. And they will be with us now. If anybody have a question, they can come up to the podium and ask them during the break time. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to thank you, dear professors, and thank the organizing committee for this very scientific, fruitful session. And thank you all, our audience, for attendance. And we will see you at 11:15. 11:15 exactly, we will start our next session. Thank you very much all for your coming and attendance.